In my neighborhood, they kill black people. You fall asleep listening to the sweet sounds of tranquility, only to be woken listening to the unforgiving sounds of bullets flying through the air. By habit, you hit the ground, waiting for that unforgiving sound to cease. Quietness follows, but quickly dissipates. Cries takes its place. She cries tears of pain for the son she just lost. Lost to a world of violence, gone before his time. Her cries are joined by a brother's and a sister's tears. The streets now become filled with neighbors and friends who are painted with the same tears, whose voices echoes the same cries, and despair fills the air that was once occupied by a child's laughter hours earlier. Sounds of sirens and blue and red lights are now on the scene as questions are, you know who did the shooting. No one knows the name of the person, but they all agree it was a black male. His body is now covered in a sheet, while his mother, brother, and sister are held by friends and neighbors, watching as his body is put into an ambulance and slow. A scene that was filled with cries and anger hours earlier is now gone, and the quiet that has taken place speaks volumes. The next day, his story is told on a local news station. People will talk about it at the barbershop and on their breaks at work. But there will be no marches, no speeches, no pines. There will only be a funeral with family and friends and neighbors. His story, like his life, will be cut short because in a few weeks, another story, just like his, will take his place. Because in my neighborhood, they kill black people. Welcome to Mr. Kevin. I have a question. Parents, caregivers, youth. I want to welcome you to this show tonight, a show that hits home with me, um, not just personally, but because of the work that I do with family and youth. It is something that see on TV all the time. Violence, the education of the young black male. You know, in my line of work, I have seen this story play out so many times, not just in my own life, but like I said, with some of the students that I had the privilege of working with over the years. And now I know some of you, and I've heard this before whenever I spoke on black crime when it relates to our young black males and how it affects them. Oftentimes I get all the questions on Kevin. Do you think that black on black crime is perpetrated by outside mitigating factors such as police brutality, racism, and other factors. Of course, I do. But as I move into tonight's session and topic, when I speak to the young man, I want those. I understand the reasons that may have given life to black on black crime in many of our black neighborhoods, such as racism. But I also want those listening to understand that when I was growing up in my neighborhood, um, when I went to an ATM machine, when I was trying to watch who was around me, in my neighborhood, when I walked down the street, I wasn't looking over my shoulders for the Ku Klux Klan. You see, in my neighborhood, I didn't see any crosses being thrown on my yard. What I did see with 20-inch rims on it, riding down the street, shooting at a park where little kids was playing. The hands that was holding those guns was the hands of those whose skin color mirrored my own. And I know that many of you who lived in neighborhoods, the one that I'm talking about now, can attest to that in those moments. Reality for a lot of young black males today. And at some point in time, I teach somebody do to you that when you look inside that mirror, who face do you see? See, over the last few years, we have seen national news of the deaths of young African American males whose life was taken short. Dude, how many young black lives were cut short by the hands of someone who shared their own skin color? For crime, there is no national headlines, no high profile lawyers or marches to show the same anger and disappointment of those that were racially motivated. There is no national courtroom coverage on an silenced trial, just a 30-second news story, followed by a funeral and a mother's tears. Now, I'm not suggesting that there is nothing being done on black crime. Individuals out there fighting this problem every single day. I work with them. I thank them all the time. But the scenes that we see on TV often, that kind of scrapes across that TV screen on local news of a young black male that's died by the hands of another one, oftentimes goes untold. You see, if we want to stop these racially motivated deaths, if we want to stop things such as police, we want to, stop racial profiling, then we must first start by vigorously confronting the issues that has given those fools a chance to think what they are doing is right. We can't give them a chance to say, I told you so. And every time we steal, every time we rob, every time we hurt one another, commit some form of violence, we give those fools a chance to say, I told you so. And they stop us and they racially profile. So let us begin. Because, like that story said, in my neighborhood, they kill black people. So tonight's show, as usual, will be guided by your participation. Parents, I broadcast this show, and when I marketed this show a week and a half ago, I had parents, send in questions or call me. Eventually, what I want to do with Mr. Kevin, I have a question. Is to parents be able to call in live. We will start some of those in November, where we will have a call in show for parents to call in live on our number and speak to me directly. I will also have guests who will questions that parents may have. I got a lot of questions from parents, two in particular that really um, um, I wanted to use tonight to help spearhead this conversation that I wanted to have on the violence, the education of the young black male. And I will bring up these two questions in a little bit. But the goal of Mr. Kevin, I have a question again, is for parents, it's for caregivers, it's for youth. And we on parenting, on education, and those things concerning their families have. And again, tonight's topic will be centered around violence and its effects and appeal to black males. My goal is not just to talk about that, but to help answer some of these questions and concerns that parents have around that. But I want to be able to understand this. I want you to understand this. Just the parents, the teachers, the community worker. I am speaking to our young boys. So when this show is over, save it. Parents, show it to your son and when he gets home from school. Teachers, show it to your classroom and let them hear it. And let's start this national conversation. So let's get started. Our first question was posed to me from a teacher, actually. The question states, it's on the screen for you to see. Mr. Kevin, I have a question. I have been a teacher for 20 years. I currently work in an alternative school where most of the population is black boys. Many of these young black men that I work with are at this school because of their behavior. The one thing that I have noticed is their appeal to violence. Many of them see this as a badge of honor. As a black teacher, I make it my priority to let them know that they are intelligent and they don't have to make negative choices in order to succeed. Despite my constant push for them to do better, many of them continue to fall back into the same negative behaviors that led them to this school in the first place. Question: what is it about violence that makes many of the young men gravitate towards it? Do they lack the drive and ambition to succeed? Or am I, as a teacher, or us as a community, are we failing them? Thank you, a tired teacher. Well, first and foremost, I wanted to thank you, teacher, if you're listening tonight. I wanted to thank you for that's no easy task. And alternative school at that. I got my 20 years ago almost. I got my stomping grounds as a speaker, as a counselor, uh, working with students and young black males at a alternative school based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I reside. And that's where I got my training. I always tell people, if you can work with kids, that's the consistent basis, then you can work with kids anywhere. And so I want to first commend you for that. You stated something inside your question that kind of draws me back to a conversation I had with an individual at a training that I had given. This was a couple of years back. You stated that the boys that you work with, or the young man in the school that you teach at, do they lack drive and ambition to succeed? Are you, or us, are we as a community, or are you as a teacher? Let's kind of answer that question first. Do they lack drive and ambition? All right. No, they don't. at all. This conversation I had with the individual had just finished speaking on a cultural diversity training that I was giving to a group of professionals on working with African American families and how to work with them and understanding some of the things and concerns that they go through. Obviously, during that training, I have brought up some of the with young men getting in trouble with gangs and things of that nature, especially for African American families. And he mentioned to me at the end of my presentation when we was having lunch, he said that, well, Kevin, I wanted to let you know that I think the reason some of those boys don't succeed is because they lack drive and ambition. I told the individual that day that, I disagree with you. And teacher, I want you to know that they do have drive and ambition. If I take a young black male and he gets up out of his bed, puts his clothes on every morning, not to go to school, but to go to a corner where he's been shot at, a corner where he's been robbed at, that same corner where he has been harassed and arrested at, the same corner. Despite all those challenges that corner presents, he gets up out of that bed every single day and he stands at that same corner where the possibility of being robbed, the possibility of being threatened, arrested, harassed is always present. If that's not drive and ambition, then I don't know what is. If we take, all right, and we put him into a boardroom and teach him how to direct that same drive and ambition in the right way, he'd be just as deadly as the ones on the corner trying to rob him. But let's delve, let's go a little bit deeper into, why so many young men, to answer your question, are, gravitates towards. I picked your question because you talked about the alternative school that you work in, and it brought up, a point when I was at an alternative school. I did a study, my own study, on why do young black males get involved with violence. And the students that I talked to and sat down with and interviewed gave me all types of, reasons why. But these top three always seem to come to the forefront. And so we're going to talk about these three reasons. Get some education to our young black males who I know and I hope are listening. All right. Number one, they say that it's about respect, Mr. Kevin. This is why. It's all about respect. They tell me that if I get disrespected, all right, then I have to disrespect somebody back. Let's listen. Tell me if I'm not lying. Let me show you how deep disrespect get. Let's say somebody that you don't like, somebody that you got beef with, all right? Y'all do not like each other. He's talking trash about you, but he's nowhere near you. As a matter of fact, he's across the street in another building at the same school that you're at. But your friend leaves that building. He runs across the street. He almost gets hit by a car, jumps over the gate, runs across the yard, goes through the hallway. Finally, he meets up with you. Sweating and tired, he looks at you and says, that boy that you don't like is talking trash about you. Way across the street. And because you feel disrespectful in that moment, you decide to leave your location, run through that same hall, that same yard, jump over that same gate, run across that same street, almost get hit by a car, and run up into that building just to confront this man and say, why are you talking about me? A lot of my boys will tell me, Mr. Kevin, yeah, we do that. That you will walk around school with your chest pumped out. When you hear somebody disrespects you, when you hear that word disrespect, right? You see, Mr. Kevin, he was popping off at the mouth, Mr. Kevin. He was popping off at the mouth on Facebook. He was popping out the mouth on Instagram. He started popping out the mouth on Snapchat. My boys heard it. I got it. We got to school and we got into the hallway. We was confronted with each other. Now we both popping off at the mouth. We going back and forth, and all of a sudden something happens. A piece of spit pops out his mouth, Mr. Kevin, hits me in the forehead. Now me and him fighting because I couldn't control my mouth. But here's the thing about that respect that you're trying to seek. If you learn how to control the mouth, then the fight doesn't happen, right? You want respect? Learn by helping somebody first. To hurt somebody is easy. So respect is the number one reason why so many of my young black males feel like they have to get involved with violence or negative behavior such as violence, because they're trying to gain some sense of respect amongst their peers and amongst those that they walk around. Another reason of why young black males get involved with violence, teacher, personal problems. When I talk about personal problems, these are the indirect consequences that lead so many young men to get in trouble. You know, when I was in third grade, fourth grade, even in fifth grade, my mother would tell you they tried to label me LD. They said I had a learning disability, that I couldn't write with the rest of the kids, that I couldn't. Oftentimes, I would get to class and I will sit down in that classroom and I wouldn't do my work. The teacher would ask me a question, Kevin, where did Christopher Columbus, when did he come to America? I didn't care, is what I would say. And the kid next to me would start laughing and making jokes because I refused to do the work. And needless to say, when that kid laughed, because I was mostly bigger than them students that I went to school, beat them up. This went on for a long time. In my young years, I got into a lot of trouble and fights. My temper. But you see, in my house, there was nights that I can remember me going to bed, instead of listening to those sweet sounds of tranquility, that I found myself being awoken to the sounds of my parents arguing and fighting. There was nights that, I would be in my home with my worked, couldn't afford to pay the light bill. I recall times when I would have to sleep on the floor at my grandmother's house with cushions from the couch. These things affected me, and it caused my anger, obviously, to rise. I'm saying this because there's a lot of young black males out there who are living in a life, in an environment, drugs and crime becomes their reality. You see, they say, what did I do to deserve this? I am but a child, and already my life, it is fixed. Fixed to bear pain, and fixed to welcome struggle, and fixed to wear pity. Like any child, he wants to play, but this pain, this struggle, this pity, it's become his reality. Plays back, that is all he has to wear. An 8-year-old child with no shoes on his feet, bare. You see the cold is making love to his body, and he has naughty sheets. So he curls himself up on the floor many nights, and he cries himself to sleep. He has an alcoholic mother. She is hardly ever there. He had a father. Why didn't he care? What happened to all the water? What happened to the electricity? Where is all the food? Why does he stay hungry? He is but a child. How could this be? Bearing that pain, welcoming that struggle, he's wearing that pity. And he gets down on his knees and he cries and cries and cries into those nights. This is the story of all the young men, many of the young men I work with over the years. And when they go to school in third and fourth grade, like I did, going through situations like that, do they really care about when Christopher Columbus come to America? No, they can care less. Never said they didn't know when he came to America. That never popped out my head. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, if you gave me a box of chicken, I would have told you 1492. I knew everything about Christopher Columbus, but at that point in time, like so many of the young men that I work with today, I was growing up and things that they deal with today, school is not number one in their life. And they're angry and they're frustrated. And that anger then is taken out on those around them. So those personal problems become a direct correlation into acts of violence for many young black males today. The third thing that pops up consistently when I talk to boys about why you get in trouble or why you get involved with violence is a learned behavior. No child wakes up at 15 years old and says, I want to join the game today. I want to go out there and hurt somebody today. At some point in time, everybody, myself, those who are listening, parents, teachers, every kid, I don't care who you are, every last one of us was in school at some point in time. And we had those things that they call career days, where they would bring different folks. And at the end of the day, that teacher put you in a circle and they asked you in second or third grade or first grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when we raised our hand, we said we wanted to be teachers, we wanted to be lawyers. I want to be a doctor, a football player, a basketball player. I want to be all types. Nobody said that when I grow up, I'm going to be violent. That's what I want to do when I grow older. That don't just happen. Everything that we do in life is a learned behavior. Learned how to be violent. I told you the story of that young man who gets up out of his bed and go hangs out on that corner every single day. That's a learned behavior. If he can learn how to get out that bed and go to that corner and sell a drug, that same man can learn how to pick up a book, learn how to read, and become a doctor. Somebody has to be willing to give him a chance. We have to be willing to teach him just as vigorously as those gangs out there on those streets teach them. Well, Mr. Kevin, what is the appeal to these gangs that these young and the violence that they do? Well, think about this much. Every child needs three things: physical, financial, and emotional support. Not just one, not just two. They need all three. Physically, they need to see somebody there every single day. Financially, they need to have food in their stomach, clothes on their back, a roof over their head, and they need to have somebody there emotionally to tell them great job when they're doing right, great job when they're doing wrong. All those things are equally important. When you don't have that in a child's life on a consistent basis, somebody else will come on in to take that place. And if you look at gangs that affect many of our young black boys today, even some of our Latino youth, the gangs offer those three things in a negative way. Physical, they are there. Financial, they are there. And emotionally, they are there. Physically, they can see that gang every single day or when they feel like it. Financially, through crime for those individuals, for that immediate gratification that they seek. And emotionally, they can see that gang every single day. And emotionally, if you mess up, they are there to chastise you. And when you do good, they are there to tell you great job and to congratulate you. And as parents and as teachers, we have to be just as vigorous to make sure those things are given to our young black kids. Because if we don't, they will learn something else. And unfortunately, for a lot of our young boys, they have learned to be violent. The question of why so many of these young boys are getting involved with violence. But young man, I want you to understand, like I said, if you can learn how to become a gang member, you can learn how to be violent, you can learn how to pick up that book and read and become a doctor. You have to be willing to give yourself a chance. I had talked about the personal problems. I wanted to kind of go back to that for a quick second. Um, to my boys, I hear the excuses a lot, Mr. Kevin. My mama is doing drugs, or my daddy not here, and this is going on in my life. I understand all that. All right. And I sympathize with you, but I cannot and will not, and nor should your parents, and nor should your teachers condone, negative behaviors because of what you're going through. We understand and we feel for you, and that makes us want. That's why we help you. That's why we there for you, because we understand what you're going through. But because we are helping you, we can, because when you look inside that mirror every single day, you don't see your mama face, you don't see your daddy face, you don't see your friends' faces, you see your face. And so who's responsible for your actions? And at some point in time, you're going to have to learn to come to grips with that. Take your struggles as your motivation to be successful, not as an excuse to do something wrong. All right? Let's get into our next question. This next question from a parent. So we had a question from a teacher, and the second question came to me from a parent. Mr. Kevin, I have a question. I am a parent who has a 16-year-old son. I work two jobs to try and make sure that my son has the things he needs. Unfortunately, I don't make enough to buy him some of the things he wants. This has always been a source of contention between us. Living situation. Since he was little, my son has had an anger problem and would often get into fights. Within the last year, he has gotten considerably worse. He has been suspended from school twice for fighting, and he recently came home late with a bruise on his right eye. As a parent, I work hard to give him the things that he wants, but it's never on time or enough. Cause my son to act this aggressively, or is there something else going on with him? Thank you. A working, tired mom. Mom, I got to admit, when I read your question, I, you know, wanted to, commend you for a parent that you're working hard to try to provide for your son in your family. And it's not easy out there. For us as African Americans, and especially for our young black boys. Um, I'm going to put up something in a little bit that I actually use at trainings, a infographic, and I'm going to show that to you guys in a second. But mom, I wanted you to know that as a parent, don't give up on your son. At some point in time, he's 16, going to come to a crossroads in his life. And when he comes to that crossroads in life, he's going to have to make a decision. For the parents who go through these tough struggles at this age with their young teenage boys and they give up on them, when he gets to that crossroads, they oftentimes goes the wrong way. But for those parents who stay on them, who stay at it, who stay vigorous, and they don't give up, when they get to that crossroad, what your mama said go. You had to drag him kicking and screaming, but eventually he would get there. Why? because at some point in time, I like to tell my parents that our students that I work with all the time, I tell those parents, your son, your daughter, at some point in time, they're going to follow your example and not your advice. And at some point in time, man, your son will follow your example and not your advice. And is your living arrangement causing your son to act this aggressively? I want to talk about some of the things that as African Americans, I do get this training on the cultural diversity training on work with African American families. Um, and the struggles that African Americans face, the historical um, approach to these struggles goes back just deeper than my lifetime. You can draw these struggles all the way back to slavery and bring them all the way up till today. And you can draw slavery on up to Jim Crow through the civil rights, all the way up until today. In that line, at some point in time, is a direct correlation to why so many of our young black males are in trouble, are getting involved with violence. Let me show you how. What you see on this screen up here, uh, I like to call this mountain light. You see two different babies on this screen. You see a black baby and a white baby. But you also see the resources that these babies have. All right. Now, the goal for everyone in life is to get to the top of this mountain that we call life, right? All of us want to get to this mountain. We all got to climb it. Nobody's subjected to it. Every last one of us has to climb this mountain. Some of us are born into this world not having the necessary resources to climb this mountain. Some of us are born with all the resources. We got the hard hat to keep us from getting hurt. We got the rope. We got the harness. We got the shoes. We got the spikes. We got everything, the gloves to keep our hands from bleeding. We have all these resources to help to make our climb that much easier. For anybody young black boys, they're not born with those resources. You see, they don't have the hard hats to keep their head safe, the gloves to keep their hands from bleeding. They don't have the shoes to keep their feet from hurting, the rope to keep themselves up and so they don't fall. They wake up in this world and they have to start climbing this mountain just like all of us. But for many of us, they have to start climbing this mountain with their bare hands. And that hurts many of them. And so what happens when they start to climb this mountain, they can't do it. They don't want to do it. They look next to the side and they see the little white kid with all the resources and he's just climbing away and he's not hurting. So they get frustrated. Yes, they do. They jump off this mountain and they try to find another way around that mountain. All right? But the quickest way to the top is straight up. But it's not. So they jump off and try to find a different path, thinking they can find an easier way. And oftentimes when they do that, this is when the trouble starts. Because they don't understand and they don't know what's around those corners. And often what's around those corners are things such as drugs, crime, and violence that oftentimes affects our young black males. And it definitely affects them to a higher degree. If you look at some of this on this infographic that I've created, you're talking about median retirement for a black family, 38,000, about 39,000 for retirement for a white family, 300,000. See what type of gap that is? Student loan debt, despite having less median retirement income, is almost double that of white, 28%, which means our boys, even when we go to college, even when we try to get out that neighborhood, we are still trying to climb this mountain with one hand tied behind our backs. And the thing that hurts us the most is home ownership. Generational wealth, all right, is will take a family um, from someone who's been in poverty to someone who's um, creating a lifestyle that's not just conducive to having a great life for himself or her, but for his kids and his grandkids down the road. That's what generational wealth is. And these disparities that blacks counterparts is striking. You know, me and my wife just purchased a home last year, uh, last summer, and I remember a conversation I was having with my grandfather, and I'm talking to you. Hopefully, I'm answering your question, teacher. Mom, I'm sorry, but to answer your question, that does that um, your living situation? I'm sure it does. It does. I'm not trying to condone his bad behavior, and I will address that in a second. But I also need you to understand that yes, it does can have an effect on his behavior and how he's acting. Even at 15 to 16 years old, it will affect them. Um, but I recall this conversation I had with my grandfather. I was about maybe 13, 14 years old, and I got this, got into a fight in school, and I was at my grandparents' house, and I was crying from school, and I was in middle school, and I was kind of tearing up on the porch, and my grandfather seen me, came outside, and he sat down next to me. And Bo told me, well, what are you crying for, Kevin? And I said, well, Bo, I'm sick and tired of being poor. We're going through what we're going through. My grandfather said, you think you got it bad? And I said, I know we got it bad. Yeah, we poor. And he was like, son, I looked at my grandfather. I said, Bo, man, we got what, 8 people in this house in one bathroom. What you talking about? That ain't good. Bo said, I used an outhouse. Told me a story. He pretty much said, Kevin, I worked hard. I worked really hard to provide your mother with a life better than his. So she can use a bathroom. So you can use a bathroom. That way you house. That made me realize at that moment that at some point in time I'm gonna have to get older. You see, my grandfather told me a story. He said, boy, the blood in your body is not yours. That blood's been passed down to you from generation to generation to generation to generation with the hope that every time that blood's been passed down, the next generation will have a better chance at life. You don't have a choice to fail. Now, mom, I'm speaking to your son. A young man, understand this much. As a black man, you're going to have to work extra hard to be average. So, how much harder are you willing to work to be the best at what you do? Average. Someone work to be the best at what you do. And as you look at this mountain, you see that climb that we took oftentimes leads us to be in jail, while whites leads them to having this great wealth in their future. That can be changed. But young people, every time we act violent, young black males, that's what we're doing. That's where we're going to end up at. That's not where you want to end up at. Now, I want to close out tonight's lesson talking about one of the main reasons why I believe our young black males are getting in trouble a lot. And it's because they don't understand or appreciate the sacrifice that somebody laid out for them. Grandma Pinky was my great grandmother. I tell these stories all the time. People call me the storyteller because when I think I read one of my poems to you guys tonight. I have a story behind everything that I do. Um, but yeah, my great grandma Pinky, she was like the inspiration in our family. She was the one that would pray, and you could eat Thanksgiving dinner until she finished praying. And sometimes the food would get cold because she prayed so long. Whenever I make a mistake, I think about people like her, all right, and those individuals who came before me, and I respect them so much. And a lot of our young kids today, they don't respect the sacrifice that others laid out for them, at all. So to the teacher who's working with those young men inside the alternative school, to the parents who are out here struggling with your sons who are constantly getting involved with violence, let me speak to your students and sons for a second. Young man, the anger that you have built up and hurting you, don't you know when you hate, you're only hurting yourselves? Because most of the people you hate don't know it, and the others don't care. You see, a wise man named Booker T. Washington once said, "You can't hold a man down without staying down there with him." You see, I understand your anger and how this, has how it has had your, held your back up against the wall. It has you thinking that the only thing that you can do is drugs or crime. There is only one problem with your solution. You have forgotten how strong you are. See, what do you do when your back is against the wall? Young man, you have the power to turn around and tear that wall down brick by brick by brick. You see your obstacles. Those things stand still. But life moves on forever. You have a choice to stand still with your obstacles, or you can. You see, a man does not steal. He does not fight or beg for the things that he wants. He earns everything that he gets because when he earns it, he appreciates it that much more. A man fights through adversity. He does not shelter in the wake of a storm. No, he goes out and he dances inside the rain. So when you are going through hell, keep going. Hell's too damn hot to stand there and wonder why. Realize the future from the past. You are that constant shining light, a heart that always lasts. Now, in closing, I told you that our young black males don't respect the sacrifices of those that came before them. Well, right now, I want to um, play, read a poem entitled Unrested Soul. And young man, I want you to listen. Listen to your ancestors, your mother, your great grandmother, your grandfather, your father, your great great grandfather, and all those who sacrifice to get you to where you're at. For all those out there, young men that's involved in trouble and violence, take a message from souls of old. My life was placed here for a reason I still cannot see. Because the legacy that I had left will not let me lay in. Why do you hurt so many people? Do you know what I've been through? I've went through beatings and I've shed tears, and I've done it all for you. My beatings to make you wise, those tears to make you brave. But your it got me turning in my grave. What's those words I hear out your mouth? Those words that will not allow me to sleep. Why did you cuss this beautiful woman? You took her money so her kids couldn't eat. Why did you beat on so many people? Why did you act? Every hit that you had gave, it caused the bleeding from within my back. The blood that came from wounds when I hung up on a tree while this man beat me, or how he just beat me. Just I wanted to read. Beat me with that whip. Go on and beat me, that's what I said. My children, they would know how to read. Yet you chose violence instead. Why do you hurt so many people? Do you know what I've been through? I've went through beatings and I've shed tears. And I've done it all for you. My beatings to make you wise. Those tears to make you brave. But your foolishness and your ignorance, it got me turning in my grave. I have given all I could give. I swear, if you can just remember my sacrifice, then my soul, it will finally rest. Thank you. Have a good night.